Alright, so I'm going to take my board, put all my parts on it, and we're probably going to be selling these pre-wired assemblies for, well, we are going to be selling them for Strats and Tellys, and might as well do them for this guitar because you can get so much on the board. Whereas like a Les Paul, it's a little bit, I don't know if we'll do one for a Les Paul or not. They're not as self-contained as the SG. And if we do a pre-wired assembly for this, it will come on a little card like this. It'll be all wired, and all you have to do is unscrew everything, drop it in your guitar, and hook up your pickups to it. Obviously, we can't hook the pickups up to this because the lead wires are running through a cavity, a hole in the body of the guitar. So there you go. And here's our schematics that come with the pickups. And I'm going to use this 57 Les Paul wiring because you lose less treble when you roll the volume down. I don't recommend using any kind of treble bypass capacitor on any kind of guitar under any circumstance. If you have a bad solder joint or you have a bad cap or resistor, it'll bleed all the time, even when the volume's all the way up, so you wind up losing all your bass, and then your guitar sounds treble heavy, and it sounds very funny. And the other thing that happens with the treble bypass is when you do roll the volume down, it gets unnaturally bright, and you lose your bottom end, and it winds up sounding like you're playing through a little trash can. So really, you should not be losing very much treble at all if you have a good guitar cord. And good. If you were just installing your pickups and you were leaving all your controls wired in as they were, because you already done this, all you would be doing is you would follow the wire, your old pickup wire, and you would hook your new pickup wire to where the old one was. Very simple. But this, we're going to show you how to do all from scratch. And if you look at the schematic, one lug of each pot is soldered to the back of its own case. So on the volume knobs, it's these, and on the tone, it's the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and push those back like that. The center two connections of your switch get pushed together. So there's an input for one side of the switch there, input for the other side, output goes to the output jack, and you have a little ground lug right there. It's a real big, thick piece of metal. And if you run a ground wire to that, then anytime you touch your switch knob, you're not going to hear a buzz if it's grounded. If it's not grounded, you'll hear a little bzz, bzz every time you touch it. The other important thing is to make sure that you get your hot wire hooked to the right spot on your jack. If you get your outputs reversed, every time you touch the strings, you're going to get a loud buzzing. And the way you can tell is if you look at the lug, there's a couple layers of the switch here. If you look at this, this is your hot connection here. That's what you want to go to your hot wire. You can look down, you can see that's a center sandwich, and it comes right to here to this little lug. So that's hot. Ground is the ring here. So the first thing you want to do, any wire more than about an inch or inch and a quarter long that is not shielded and is part of the hot circuit, anything longer than an inch or so, you can start getting noise. So we use a braided shield cable for most stuff, unless it's a real short jump, or for a Fender guitar, because traditionally they're just wired with this vintage cloth wire. There's a couple ways to deal with the shielding on this wire. One is you can just grab it real softly and you can push it back like that, and your center will come out like so. That's one way to do it. And of course you push back the cloth here too, and then that exposes that. It's called pushback wire, for obvious reasons. So I'm going to hook that up there, and then I'm going to want to tie a little wire around this and ground it to the switch case. But I also got to be careful that this doesn't get pushed around and hit one of my hot connections, so that will short out the whole signal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up putting a little piece of shrink tubing over the end of this to prevent that. So this is, I'm going to use this for ground. This is pushback wire. I'm just going to twist that around there, like that. I'm going to solder that. We've talked about soldering in some of my other videos, installing Stratocaster pickups. There's a lot of details about it in that video, and I'm not going to go over it again on this one. Tells you what kind of solder and how big of a soldering iron and all that stuff. Ta-da! Wonderful. Okay, now I'll get a little piece of this heat shrink. Slide that up there. Yeah, look at that. We're going to make it look professional. This will be my hot lead. So I want to make sure that I get the wire soldered really good to these two little prongs, and the prongs themselves need to be soldered together. And you can do that all in one shot. Just got to be able to get enough solder on there. Looks easy, doesn't it? Let it cool without moving it, or you'll get a bad solder joint. Take my ground. Notice how I'm kind of bending the wire a little bit, and that helps keep it in the place that in the position that you want it to be. This will take a little more heat because it's a pretty thick piece of metal there. It'll take longer to cool down. Yes. Grounding's a little bit tricky. On a long piece of wire like this, you don't have to ground the shield at both ends. All you need to have is it grounded at one end. People forget about that, you know. But you need to have a continuous ground to all the parts to the switch. So that means that you could run a wire like across these two, soldered to those two, to the ground on the switch. And you could have another wire soldered to these two, to the ground on the switch like that.